WSQF, Key Biscayne, Miami Beach, and Miami. Link Radio.
Welcome, everyone. This is MacontheRock with your Concrete Conservative Hour. We are here to discuss, for the first time on the radio, my involvement in the Convention of States project. Did you know that you could amend the Constitution in two forms? We've only amended the Constitution in one form. Both are listed under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. I'm going to read Article 5 at this moment, and I'm going to read it out loud because the second way to amend the Constitution is through the Convention of the States. Article 5 reads, "The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses in the 9th section of the first article, and that no state, without its consent, shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate." So basically, the joint resolutions of Congress generated by the Congress could be sent to the states, and ratification process begins. But the second version, which is the one we'll be discussing today, kind of like a clause B, kind of like an A and a B per se, in essence, is for, since we have 50 states, for 34 states to pass identical applications stating clearly what the convention will be discussing in terms of forms and methods of amendments. And then after that convention of states, which the legislature will appoint representatives called commissioners, me and Ed Vidal, who I have present today, who's legislative liaison, and I am media liaison for Florida, we both probably are crossing our fingers wanting to be appointed or nominated to attend this convention.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, it's going to be a full-time job to do that. And there have been a couple of trial runs. One was in Wilmington, Delaware, or rather Williamsburg, Virginia, last year. That went very well in September of last year.
And now in Arizona.
There's another one in Arizona. So we're getting a lot of practice doing this, and I think we'll be ready when the time comes.
And I personally attended the first Florida simulations, one in Sanford, which is, kind of like a suburb of Tampa. Sanford, Florida, we did a simulation in 2015, and later that year in Jupiter. Perhaps it was later that year in the same.
Florida was one of the first states really jumped into it.
Yeah, we were the third.
We beat Texas.
Absolutely. Well, Texas has just passed.
Texas just passed it, right? So another 12 states.
Yeah, the order that I take pride in is it was Alaska, Georgia, and then Florida.
Right, absolutely.
Which is commendable considering that the real leaders in the Florida legislature for a long time was Miami-Dade County, which consists of a lot of immigrant Cuban Americans. So I'm very proud that our constituencies believed in Convention of States. So Ed, my first question to you is, what can you educate our listeners in what has me very perturbed and confused and upset, that some of the more important issues of the day, which I believe are the repeal of the 16th and 17th Amendment, restoring federalism, what is it you think that's going on at the higher intellectual planes of our movement that seems to not put those two repeals above term limits for Supreme Court justices?
We'll get to the actual amendment, but first of all, I would like to say that in 2017, the Convention of States project is the Tea Party of 2010, because in 2010, concerned Americans rose up, and they rose up for fiscal responsibility, limited government, and free enterprise. And we gave the House to the Republicans in 2010. And then we fought hard, but we had a very weak candidate in 2012, so we didn't make any
Also,
advances.
we had weak candidates in some of the Senate races.
Absolutely. So
not just
we didn't-
presidential.
So in 2012, Obama got reelected, but in 2014, we gave the Republicans the Senate, like they asked. We gave them a majority in the Senate, and they used that for some good things. They blocked any replacement of Justice Scalia, and we got Neil Gorsuch this year. And then in 2016, we finally got the presidency. So the Republicans control the presidency, the Senate, and the House. And yet, they're not implementing the Tea Party agenda, starting with Obamacare repeal,
Yes.
which they promised for 7 years. So the key problem is that Washington is broken. Washington is failing to respond. And when I say Washington...
And the first three senators from the Tea Party made it very clear when they got elected.
Right.
Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, and Rand Paul.
Yes,
all stated what you just said.
Well, they are all Tea Partiers, true Tea Partiers.
Yes.
So they have not wavered. But the core problem is that we have a bunch of establishment rhinos in Washington.
And rhinos, for the audience to understand, rhino is Republican in name only.
Republicans in name only. And they are three things. First of all, they are cowardly. They flinch. They want the press, the mainstream media, to approve of them. They want to be invited to the right cocktail parties. They seek the approval of the mainstream media, which is completely progressive. So there's no point in doing that. So they're cowardly. They cower whenever some issue comes up. Number two, they're corrupt. I was saying that they're not exactly pay to play, but they are corrupt. Their concern, once they get elected, is to get reelected, regardless of what they do. And in order to do that, they want to please their donors. And their donors often don't have the same interest as the grassroots voters who put them there in the first place.
Plus, the donors also have lobbyists who write the law.
Absolutely. The lobbyists write the law, and there's no pushback, and the donors very often have different interests. For example, on immigration, the grassroots is very much against illegal immigration. Many of even the Republican donors want open immigration because, for example, Walmart, 3% of their revenue comes from food stamps.
Yes.
And their profit margin is 1%.
Yes.
So all their profits come from food stamps. So they want all these illegal immigrants who are collecting food stamps. That's one example of the kind of corruption that we have in Washington. So that even
Plus,
the
the
Republicans,
farm
they
cooperatives,
want
they need
cheap labor and
they
whatever.
want
Yeah.
farmhands.
Now, and construction, especially residential construction, relies on cheap labor. So there's different interests. So that's the second. And then the third thing is I think they're incompetent. They are politically incompetent, these rhinos. They get outmaneuvered. They get out-thunk. They get out-rhetoric.
And zero creativity.
And they have no creativity. That's like, but the problem is if you're a conservative, you don't want to go into government. You want to be a business guy. You want to run your business, run your enterprise.
And find a way to pay less taxes.
And then pay the taxes and all that. So we're getting, it's hard to be a conservative politician because if you're really into politics, you think politics is really important, you're probably not a conservative.
Yeah.
The thing, my son was going to be a political consultant after college, and he quickly came around, and I told him, look, get an MBA, get a business career, a profession for 20 years or however long it takes, and then when you've got some money, when you have a business, then you can run for office, and you don't have to, you can push whatever issues you want. You're not dependent on any lobbyists or donors. You make your own issues.
He finds out a little bit later that he is.
Well, a little bit, but not totally.
It's very hard to stay to your guns. I mean,
but some
they'll
people
put
have done
someone
it.
well-funded against you in a primary.
Well, Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, as you were saying, and Rand Paul. So those are the issues. We have this rhino establishment that is cowardly, corrupt, and incompetent. And their position is, I don't know if you remember the Harlem Globetrotters?
Yes.
They were very successful for their time, but they had a team that played against them, the Washington Generals. And the Washington Generals always lost. They always came in second out of two. But they did very well. They got to play basketball. They were paid pretty well. They traveled, and
they got paid to be humiliated every night.
And that's what the Republicans in Washington are like. They have the Washington General strategy. They don't want to win. They just want to place.
You know what I call that in my book, The Fiscals?
What's that?
I call it political Stockholm syndrome.
Absolutely. That is another good way to political Stockholm syndrome. So that's the problem that we're facing. So the Convention of States, as I said, is the new Tea Party. We're trying to break through that logjam in Washington using the tool that our founding fathers gave us. People are starting to take notice that we've got 12 legislatures. We have a lot of momentum. Most of our issues are conservative issues, so they resonate more with the Republicans. There are 32 Republican legislatures in the United States. We need 34 in order to get the Convention of States called. And one of the good things about Mr. Trump winning the presidency is that Democrats are now finding the virtues of federalism.
Yes.
So, for example, in Illinois, it hasn't passed. Illinois is controlled by the Democrats, but there are a lot of Democrats who are supporting the Convention of States.
Okay, so this is a perfect moment for me to
fire away
to really get people to focus on why I'm against a balanced budget amendment.
Okay.
I believe, and I said so in the two simulations. I directed both my comments over air in conference with Mark Meckler. Was the first time I said it at Sanford, and in Jupiter. Michael Ferris in Sanford and Mark Meckler in Jupiter. Both times I said, how is it that you can keep the Democratic Party, who may regain power, because if we continue to fail, like you say, they're going to be in power for a long time, like they were in the 30s and when they were again in the 50s and 60s, where 2 decades of imperial power. It was just grotesque, where they controlled. People don't realize that the United States, since 1901, the Republicans have had only one filibuster-proof Senate, and that was in 1909 to 1911. It was their last, because then the atrocity of 1913 with the income tax and the Amendment 17 and the Federal Reserve on Christmas Eve or the 28th.
But see, that was the progressive movement. That's what we're up against.
Yes. Well, people don't realize that the Democrats in that same time frame have had 11 filibuster-proof Senates. They've been able to do all this damage and created a bankrupt state that we have today. So who is to say that with a balanced budget amendment, you're now giving the Democrats a constitutional mandate to raise taxes in the 60-70 percentile that was seen after World War II
but see,
to balance the budget?
Raising taxes does not balance the budget.
Yes, it does.
No.
Why?
Because people then avoid paying taxes and there's less economic activity.
Well, that's
what happened
organic.
in the 70s.
But
in the 70s, we had high rates and there was a lot of tax shelters. So the effective rate was actually lower than the published rate. So so
if we're going into debt,
and
instead of just writing a bounce check like we do now, going into debt, sell bonds, and devalue the American currency, you're giving a license with a balanced budget amendment
not necessarily
to raise taxes to balance the budget every year.
Every state in the union almost has a balanced budget amendment.
Okay, but they don't print money.
Well, that's the other thing. That's what we got to take control.
That's a big difference.
Well, that's a big difference, but it's a way to start.
No, at the federal level.
So you disagree with the balanced budget amendment. Well, you know what I say to that?
I want to kill that at the Convention of States.
You come to the convention. You participate. But at least let's have the convention.
Yes.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. Let's call the convention.
So what I was saying is that we have a lot of momentum. We have 12 states now, and it's in many other legislatures. There will not be any more elections, and most legislatures are out of session this year. So there will only be a few sessions in the fall. There may be some sessions next year. So we're hoping to get up to 15 to 20. And then the year after that, there will be another election, and that's where we're going to make another effort to try to get
another
up to
10 states. You would
another 10 states, get up to 30.
And when we get to 30, the Congress of the United States could be shaking in their boots.
And then they might decide to call a convention instead. Once we get, so the more we get, the better. And the thing that we're having an effect, because liberal outlets and things like the Pew Charitable Trust and some of the far left websites are beginning to notice, hey, there could be a convention of states. And
what do you think about them actually sneaking in as commissioners?
I think that will be an issue, and that's why I'm counting on you to be active in screening the commissioners and talking to them about what kind of amendments to adopt. And the thing you have to know is we have Jim DeMint, who was at the Heritage Foundation. He left there. He has now joined the Convention of States.
That's probably why Marco Rubio beat Ted Cruz.
Why? What was that?
To support the Convention of States.
Oh, you mean he was the first to do it? Yeah.
I begged Ted Cruz during the campaign, since I had so much access to him when I was here in Florida. I could not believe a constitution